okay, next team on the list is the Chicago Bears. If you guys are just tuning in for the first time, we're going across the entire NFL, going over the 2024 season, going over the 2025 offseason, and then giving our predictions for the 2025 season. Before this episode might be a little bit different just because of what the Chicago Bears did to not just me and you who were high on them last year, but what they did to everyone. Because even what it seems like at this point, and I don't know if you have experienced this, it seems like even the fans forgot where they put themselves after the 2023 season, going into the 2024 season, after they took Caleb Williams. Do you remember how high not just you were, but how high the fans were on this team after the 2023 season when Eberflus took this team? They went 7-10, and at the end of the year, they had some wins. They beat the Detroit Lions, they beat the Arizona Cardinals, and they beat the Atlanta Falcons. They had Tyson Badgett went 2-2 as a starter, and then Justin Fields went 5-8 as a starter, and then the draft was starting to come up. Everybody was in a really good place with the Chicago Bears team. It's like, man, we had 7 wins. Our quarterback position was a mess. Eberflus had this team rallied, and he had this team rallied. They didn't quit on the season. They finished. They won 7 games, and now we have the first overall pick, and we have this stacked roster, and we're just dropping Caleb Williams into the mix, and there should be absolutely zero reason why this team does not succeed year one. Is that how you remember it? Because now I'm seeing when the Eberflus situation got bad, everybody abandoned ship on the Eberflus train, but there was a time when everybody was really high on this guy.
On Matt Eberflus, yeah, it was a discussion of like, should we move on? Or there, I remember the most of the discussion being around Justin Fields more so than Eberflus, maybe.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
it felt like half of the people wanted Justin Fields because it finally felt like he put together like a decent season and something to build on. And yet they still ended up in a spot where they had the number 1 overall pick. Prior, but that was because of the trade with the Panthers, correct?
Yes.
So there was a lot of people that said, no, this is the best that you're going to get out of Justin Fields, and half the people that said, this is there's something here to build on. And I remember I think on the side of like taking Caleb. I was on the side of taking Caleb Williams, and I did expect this team to be much better than the 5-12 record that they put out last season. Um, but with that being said, it also kind of felt like everything else kind of crumbled alongside of them drafting Caleb Williams. I know there was moments where that defense was buzzing around. One of the better defenses at the end of 2023 heading into 2024,
Correct.
if I remember correctly. And that we just did not see the same type of defense from them consistently this season. Um, and then the ups and downs of Caleb Williams, there was more so downs, but there was flashes here and there. But um, and it certainly did not ease the tension of the group of people that wanted them to stick with Justin Fields, because
That
I'm
that
sure there's probably Bears fans that still want him in Chicago.
I would say I think that conversation's a little irrelevant. I mean, obviously they had to move on from him. It was an opportunity. The contract was up. It was an opportunity, or no, they traded him, but it was an opportunity to get somebody with as high as a caliber as Caleb Williams with the number 1 overall pick. I don't think that. I know that like DJ Moore and everything like that. Really, what I wanted to focus on was the Eberflus situation, because you even said it. You were like, at the end of the 2023 season, this defense was playing really well, and it was like, okay, well, like if the defense can play this well, and we can insert Caleb Williams into this offense and kind of figure everything out with Shane Waldron and blah blah blah. Everybody had very high expectations for the Chicago Bears team to at least take the next step from not having a worse record from 7-10. They went 7-10 in 2023 to win
5-12, yeah.
in 2024. Would you say that was fair? Am I remembering that correctly? Like, were people excited about the Chicago Bears team and Matt Eberflus going into the 2024 season?
Yeah, I think there was some skepticism offensively, but as a whole, I think from what I remember as well, there were people that had expectations of them not being a Super Bowl team necessarily, but them taking that next step and at least being a playoff team.
Yeah.
Um, Bears fans, please correct us if we're wrong.
Well,
That's what
the
I
reason I'm bringing all of this up, and you're kind of putting a lot of holes in my argument already. But like Bears fans, as of now, like kind of have always have switched the narrative of being like, no, we always have hated Eberflus. We knew the 2024 season was going to be an absolute wreck, and that's just not how I personally remember it at all.
really.
No.
I could easily be wrong, right? But I feel like there was a group of people that were okay with him coming into this season and bringing in a new QB and getting the offense figured out while having a high level defense
I
is
mean, Noah,
something you can work with.
they were on Hard Knocks, and he grew a beard, and the Chicago Bears fans were like, "This guy's back." Like, do you not
Yeah,
remember all of this, or are you
I do
like,
now that you say
are you
that.
high?
I
Are you
forgot that
high
they were
right now?
I forgot they were on Hard Knocks, to be honest with you, because
Okay.
I don't watch that anymore.
Okay, you seem
So
a little spacey currently. I'm just making sure you weren't smoking
sorry.
weed before this.
No, I am slightly
Okay.
flustered. I just had to finish some stuff up for work. I'm moving, so I'm sure was packing all my shit up to move.
All right. All right.
So,
Let's keep it pushing here. So
sorry.
in 2024, the Chicago Bears finished 5-12. They finished fourth in the NFC North. They obviously missed the playoffs. They went 4-8 under Matt Eberflus, and then 1-4 under Thomas Brown. Some of the DVOA metrics, the offensive DVOA, they finished 27th in the NFL. The defensive DVOA, they finished 22nd in the NFL. Special teams DVOA, they finished 5th in the NFL, so good for them. But in total team DVOA, they finished 25th in the NFL, and that matches up with pretty much everything that we saw on the field as well. This team was the definition of a train wreck, and there are going to obviously be people sitting here, which is like the new thing to do. It was like, oh, like Caleb Williams threw for 3,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. There is like nothing that was desirable about this offensive group in any way, shape, or form. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they absolutely imploded. I know that they made some hires this offseason. We'll get into that, but the way that this defense performed last season, I think it would be safe to say that was a shock to everybody. I felt like this defense was one of the more solid units going into last season, and the fact that they fell off of a cliff, that definitely is concerning to me going into this season as well.
Yeah, they did manage to win the turnover margin, but the biggest thing that stands out to me about this team is more so the wins and losses by less than a score. So just going through their 2024 season, um, they were 1-5 in field goal games, and then they were 3-7 in games by 8 or less points. So just rattling a couple off here. They lost by Houston week 2. They lost to Houston, excuse me, week 2, 19-13, one possession game. They lost to Indianapolis 21-16, one possession game. Lost to Washington week 8, one possession game. Lost to Green Bay week 11, one possession game. Lost to Minnesota week 12, one possession game. Lost to Detroit, one possession game. And then they lost to Seattle, one possession game. Like, it's a miracle that they were even in this many one possession games based off of just how off rhythm, how inconsistent, and how just clunky they felt offensively watching these games. It would be like they could get into a rhythm for like a drive, and then they looked like they had no clue what they were doing for 5, 6 drives in a row. Um, so I think that's something to consider moving forward with this team. But a
which is what?
disappointing season per se on defense from this
Okay.
team.
Yeah, I think something that we always kind of highlight too is like if they lost all of those games, like some of those are going to go the other way as well. Like one off the top of my
Yeah.
head is like that Washington Commanders game. They shouldn't have lost that football game when Jaden Daniels threw that Hail Mary. I mean, let's just call it what it is. But um, yeah, I mean, other than that, like you would have to think that some of these games going into this season will go the other way. We have that same energy with everybody else, and even though I'm not high on the Bears right now, I will keep that same energy with them.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. The amount of times that we can nitpick a game that doesn't go the Bears' way or a team's way by one possession, the similar thing can be said the opposite direction. I mean, they won against Tennessee, and Caleb Williams didn't even throw for 100 yards. I think that was the Will Levis game where, well, every Will Levis game turned into a meme, but like things just were happening in that game on the Tennessee side of the ball that were just kind of ridiculous. And then same thing, probably I don't remember the last game of the year per se against Green Bay, but like they won 24-22. Like sometimes you're going to get sometimes you're going to get bounces and sometimes you're not. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Really, that like I said, this season it was a season of heartbreak almost. It feels like. I mean, the list of losses after the bye week. Like you would think that you would round into form after a bye week. You start the season strong with going 4-2, and you're probably feeling pretty decent, even though it was not what you wanted to see on offense at times. But right before the bye against Carolina and Jacksonville, they put up 36 and 35 points. So it felt like, okay, we're kind of rounding into form. Then you come off of the bye week and the lack of leadership, the lack of whatever. And I'm not just putting that on the head coach, I'm putting that on the players as well. How do you come
Yeah.
back from a bye week and lose one, two, three, four, five, six,
Every
seven,
game
eight,
but one.
nine, 10 games straight? You go on a 10-game losing streak. And that the last loss too to Seattle where you lose 6-3. I just don't understand how you can even allow that to happen.
No, and I don't either. At some point you got to have some pride and gut one of these wins out. But that's what happens. That's the result of not necessarily being a good team. Is not being able to make that adjustment because realistically, the Bears should not have been a team to lose 10 games in a row at any point of the season. I think they have, not saying that they have like an insane roster, but they have a good enough roster that they should never go through a period of 10 losses straight. Like that's something that we would expect from the Browns or like Carolina a few years ago or the Saints. But like with with the talent on this team, there's no reason they should have lost 10 straight.
Yeah, absolutely not. Let's get into the 2025 offseason here. Uh, some roster losses that they had on this team. They lost Keenan Allen. I don't think that matters much at all. Tevin Jenkins, Coleman Shelton, Jack Sanborn. Kevin, I have Kevin Byard on here, but it looks like he's still on the team. I don't know why I had that. Gerald Everett, Demarcus Walker are some guys that I have. Do you have anybody that I'm missing, or did I say people wrong here?
I have DeAndre Carter. I have Gerald Everett. Um, Jalen Jones. That's probably it of worth noting.
Let's get into the 2025 free agency period because my biggest question about the Chicago Bears moving forward, it's not Caleb Williams. I think the Caleb Williams thing will figure itself out at some point. Is he going to be the big addition that everybody thought he was going to be? And what I mean by that is like, do you think that he's going to fully deliver as like the prince that was promised? I think that there's probably a question mark on that, and I feel like that's fine to say at this point. And then the other thing that I have faith in is I think at this point that they should be able to figure out that the Ben Johnson thing should work. I would hope so, at least. If not, then that's just going to be like a massive downfall. He seems to be like one of the biggest offensive minds in like the last like 15 years. So if that doesn't work out, then the Chicago Bears are cursed, and it is what it is. But one thing that I do want to completely dismantle is I think that I think the Chicago Bears will succeed. I don't think Ryan Poles as the GM has earned any trust or respect of making the correct decisions to build this roster out. I say that because when we went back, at the beginning at the 2023 season, going into the 2024 season, and when we added like a Nate Davis on the offensive line, people were fired up about it. And then he got cut. You add a Keenan Allen. He was an absolute non-factor. The names that were getting brought in on defense and offense, people were really excited about going into this season, and they pretty much all flopped. Now I'm looking at what they did this offseason. The first thing that I want to highlight is this offensive line. The Chiefs, who lost the Super Bowl because of how bad their offensive line was, and this is what I'm stealing this from Shil Kapadia from The Ringer.
Mhm.
The Joe Thuney was on that Chiefs offensive line, and the Chiefs were like, okay, we need to get our offensive line better. Let's get rid of Joe Thuney and let's trade him.
Yep.
And the Chicago Bears take the bait. Then Drew Dahlman, who was another great offensive line in the NFL, was a part of the Falcons offensive line. The Falcons are like, which piece of this offensive line is expendable? It's our center, Drew Dahlman, and he goes to the Chicago Bears. Then we go to Jonah Jackson, who was a complete non-factor for the Los Angeles Rams, and the Rams are in the same situation as everybody else. It's like, we need to build up this offensive line as well to protect Matt Stafford. And what do? They get rid of Jonah Jackson, and the Bears fall for the bait. So I have big questions across this entire offensive line. I don't think Braxton Jones has played too well since he started in the NFL, and I still think that there's question marks around Darnell Wright. Caleb Williams obviously took a ton of sacks last season. I forget how many it was off the top of my head. I can check, but I think that that's probably a fair thing to go in. He got sacked 68 times last season. I think going into this season now, where these guys are a bunch of names, but they're slapping everybody together and just rolling out an offensive line unit and being like, yep, these are our guys and these are a bunch of names. I am extremely worried about this unit. I mean, Caleb has already gotten sacked a bunch of times, and to just roll out a whole nother unit of guys who I think it's fair to say that there's question marks around, and the guy who I trust the least in the NFL to bring in talent during the offseason in Ryan Poles. I think that there's red flags written all over this.
I wish that I could disagree with any of that because I also heard the same thing today. And initially, my thoughts about this offensive line were like, okay, I don't, I wasn't like, this is going to be the best offensive line in the NFL by any means. Do I think it will be an upgrade over what they had last year? I would surely hope so. I looked it up here. The most sacks that a rookie quarterback has taken in a season is 76, and that was the 2002 Houston Texans and David Carr. And what did you say Caleb had? 68.
Yeah.
So really not that far off. And we saw kind of how David Carr's career transpired after that. Do I think that's how Caleb Williams' career is going to transpire? Absolutely not. I think he'll end up being better than that. One thing I'll say is I think probably having a better offensive minded coach will help with the development of Caleb and getting the ball out of his hand faster if this offensive line is not improved compared to last year's. But I think those concerns that you mentioned are absolutely valid. There's a reason that all of these teams moved on from these guys. And the criticism around Poles to build out an offensive line is certainly up in the air. And if this offensive line isn't middle of the pack this upcoming season, they're going to be coming for his head in Chicago because at this point, Caleb Williams, he can't go through another 68 season sack. And I know that not all of those are offensive lineman fault. There was definitely a handful of times where he was holding on to the football way too long. But you got to give the guy a chance at the end of the day if you really want to see what he has. And so far, I don't think they've done a great job building the offensive line in front of him. I think they improved the skill position players this offseason, but I am equally as nervous about this offensive line.
I want to go on the other side of the ball as well, and then I'm going to critique the draft as well. And I know the first thing that everybody's going to say in the comments, if this video gets any sort of traction, well, Poles just re-signed a deal, like blah, blah, blah. That means nothing. People re-sign deals and get fired all the time. I think he's very much on the hot seat as much as people like to act like he's not. I think Poles is like one of the easiest candidates for one of the first GMs fired this year, or like in the offseason if things don't go well. If they fall apart earlier in the season, or if it goes like decent, I think that he's definitely on the chopping block. This team is like a playoff team, needs to be a playoff team at this point. But on the defensive side of the football, the way that I would describe what they're doing, what Poles is doing, is it feels like he's trading his like second, third, fourth, and fifth round picks for like 80 overalls on Madden. Like where he's like, oh, like Montez Sweat's available. Let's go grab him. Oh, Grady Jarrett's old ass is available. Tremaine Edmonds, who has honestly just been very underwhelming since he signed that massive contract with the Chicago Bears. And then you go into the secondary as well. I really like Jalen Johnson. I think he's a good player. Jaquan Brisker took a big step back last year. I know that he had a concussion, but missed a majority of time, but didn't look like the same player. Kevin Byard III, he hasn't had a good season, and when he went to Philly, he sucked. He hasn't had a good season in forever. He hasn't had a good season in forever. And Tyreek Stevenson obviously had that situation last year where he let up that touchdown and kind of turned their season. And then Kyler Gordon's a decent player, but I'm just not impressed with this defense in any way, shape, or form. I feel like that Poles sees names out there and people who are available, like TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, all these guys, and thinks that he can just compile them on a defense and thinks that he can put out a top unit. This unit was brutal last year. And if you can sit here and say that Dennis Allen can turn this unit around and make it better, I could get behind that and agree with you to a little bit, but we're talking about a defense who finished, what did I say here? They finished 22nd in the NFL. I think even at best, can they get to a middle of the road defense this season? Like, I don't think that this unit could even sniff a top 10 finish at this point in time.
Yeah, there's definitely some concerns there too. Like, when healthy, I think Jaquan Brisker is a good player, but he was out all last season, basically, like you said. And then I think you worded it perfectly, basically just saying they have names, but they're all like 80 overalls in Madden. I think this unit is going to take some time to get good if they can even reach that point. Am I confident in that happening? Not necessarily. Where did you say they were at in defensive or DVOA last season? Like 24th, 22nd. Yeah. And I'm looking here. They gave up 21.8 points a game. That put them middle of the road too. So I think at the very least, they would end up being just a middle of the pack defense if things go well. But I realistically wouldn't expect much more than that from them defensively. I think their best defense has a chance to be their offense just being on the field.
I really say that because I just think that like Dio Odunwingo, I can't say his name, so excuse me. He was never that good in with the Indianapolis Colts. He didn't put up any big sack seasons. I don't think he's going to be a great edge rusher for you. Grady Jarrett's 32 years old. He's not going to get to the quarterback that much. He never got to the quarterback in Atlanta. That's why Atlanta was finishing at the dead last pretty much in sacks every single season. And then Montez Sweat, he's had, I think, his best season as a pro. He finished with 12 and a half sacks. I'm looking at here. Yeah, 12 and a half sacks. That's not somebody who I'm looking at as like somebody who's like very elite, who's going to be getting to the passer a ton throughout the course of a season. So I'm worried about this defensive line. I think that this run game is going to be pretty weak. I don't think that they're going to be able to rush the passer. So at that point, like I think that you're going to be asking your secondary to do a ton. And I think that you have Jalen Johnson. I think he's a really great player, but that I think with Kyler Gordon, I think you have like 1.5 good secondary players. So I'm just not even foreseeing how this defense could probably take a step up unless if Dennis Allen is just like a god at some point, which the defenses that he was putting out in with the New Orleans Saints, and they always kind of had like that tough defense. Well, New Orleans Saints kind of sucked over the last few years. So if that's who you're going to be kind of drawing your comparisons to, at that point, they're playing a brand of football where it was just like, we're going to try to make this maybe the ugliest possible game of all time. So I don't really agree with the fact that maybe year one that Dennis Allen can make like a massive impact with this unit.
Yeah, I think that the sacks from this defense will end up having to come from just coverage sacks. And that is asking a lot of the secondary when it's not an elite secondary to begin with. So I think there is certainly room for concern with how often they are going to be able to rush the passer because you can't rely on coverage sacks you can't rely on coverage sacks to be what carries you if you don't have an elite secondary. And they have 2.5 guys. Who knows what we're getting with Jaquan Brisker if he's healthy. Isn't Tyreek Stevenson the guy that was chirping the sidelines on the Hail Mary?
Yeah, I said that
Yeah,
already.
why the hell is that guy still in the is he still on your team?
Well,
I would have cut him so quickly.
that's not the polls way.
And then
The
Kevin
last,
Byard, like you said, hasn't had a good season in 5 years. So
yeah, he's washed. I want to get into one more thing about this their draft that they had, and then we can continue to move on here. What what's to like about this draft that they just had? They needed offensive linemen. There were offensive linemen available, a ton of them actually. I think of a Kelvin Banks Jr. who they could have potentially got. I think, and instead they go with Colson Loveland with the 10th overall pick, which I think was maybe the worst pick of the first round by far. Um, right now, as it stands, Cole Kmet's their starting tight end, and he's their second string. Even if he was their starter, I don't think addressing the tight end position, which the tight end position was extremely deep. There were guys going into the second round, like the Rams got a guy, the Jets got a guy, and Mason Taylor, the Oregon guy went to the Rams. They went and took somebody which they could have gotten. There were a ton of dudes at the top of the draft last season where I felt like you could have potentially upgraded the offensive line. You could have gotten an elite edge rusher. There were multiple guys available, and they went with a tight end pick with Colson Loveland. I think that that's absolutely brutal. And then the other pick that they made that I don't fully agree with either is they go in the top of the second round and they grab Luther Bird in the third. Why do you need another wide receiver? You have DJ Moore locked up on a very long-term deal. You have Roma Dunze, who you took in the top 10 last season, who did not look that great last year at all. And then you go and you add another wide receiver in the top 100 picks. I think that what they have done this offseason, people have gassed up way too much. I think it's a flat F. I think to really not be able to look at your team and being like, okay, like what went wrong last season? It wasn't not having enough pass catchers. It was the fact that Caleb Williams was running for his life and got hit 100 times last year. And to sit there and be like, okay, let's get Colson Loveland, who is a zero as a blocker, who is more of a wide receiver than a true tight end to begin with. And then to go and grab a Luther Burden, who's just a smaller, quicker wide receiver to begin with. This is just, they're like, I'm like at a loss for words almost a little bit. It's just what is Poles thinking when he's looking at this team? And do you agree with that statement that I think that these two picks do I think that they could be potentially good players? Yeah, for sure. But there's also one ball on the football field at all times. So I think that like not everybody's going to be able to eat. So I just think that those were a clear misuse of resources. And it was pretty clear because, I mean, like I said, I think that the two positions that they needed to upgrade were the offensive line, the edge rusher position. And then if you wanted to go out on the limb and say you could add other pieces on this defense, I think that would have been completely fair.
So, do I think this was an F? No, because I think these guys will be good players. But from a perspective of drafting for need, did he get an F for that? Yes. These two picks were they were luxury picks. These were two guys that you draft if you have everything else pretty much shored up and you just want to like improve around the edges. I think Cole Kmet is more than capable as a starting tight end, and I think them with DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, who was an early first round pick, like you mentioned last year, and they brought in Olamide Zaccheaus as the third wide receiver. I think that that's more than fine of a wide receiver group for a quarterback going into his second year. I think that they definitely should have addressed offense and defensive line and paired Caleb Williams with a potential cornerstone offensive tackle that he'll have by his side for the rest of his career, hopefully. I think it's probably easier to go out and replace wide receivers, running backs, tight ends than it is to find a left tackle, a right tackle, a defensive end, a D tackle that you can have for the foreseeable future. And that's where I agree with you on Poles getting an F because of the draft for the lack of them drafting for need. I think Luther Burden and Colston Loveland are going to be solid NFL players, but what good does it do if
Are
Caleb
they?
Williams? I
You
think
know,
they'll be all right, but what good
I
does it
think
do if Caleb Williams
I
is running around for his dear life?
Luther Burden was a lock to go in the first round pretty much and fell the whole way to the second. So I think that there's fair questions around him. And Colston Loveland, like, yeah, sure, like he might be a really good player, but is he at like the same caliber coming out of college as like a Brock Bowers was?
No, but I'm not even. I know that what you're about to say is they were drafted early, so
They're drafted very
expecting.
early.
Yeah, so I get that. I'm
Yeah.
not pushing back on that at all. But I still think they can be good players in the NFL. But my point is, I agree with you that
do,
they
do
did
you
not
think
need to take
Colson
these two guys.
Loveland, like gut feeling, like do you think Colson Loveland at the end of, and this is obviously a broad question, but just like gut feeling, no matter what, do you think that like when it's all said and done, do you think Colson Loveland would have been like, yep, that was a guy that you had to take in the top 10 of the draft?
Oh no, but that's what I said. I said
Okay.
these were luxury picks. These were guys that they took that you take if you're already good in a lot of other places. I don't think taking a first round tight end, but who knows? It worked out for the Raiders. They found a generational tight end, but like,
Off
I don't
brutal
know.
comparison, the Raiders won 4 games last season.
I'm saying they took a phenomenal tight end and it worked out for them. Do I expect Colson Loveland to do exactly what Brock Bowers did? Absolutely not. I think Brock Bowers is one of the best tight ends in the NFL. But at the end of the day, they shouldn't have taken a wide receiver and a tight end with their first two picks, anyways.
I'm looking at the draft. What happened here? Kelvin Banks Jr. did go 9th, so they wouldn't have been able to get him. Obviously, that would have been the guy who I would have liked to see them get, but that was impossible. Then Michael Williams goes the edge out of the edge out of Georgia, and then they have Tyler Booker, who is already getting good praise as an offensive guard for the Cowboys. Kenneth Grant, the D tackle from Michigan. Walter Nolan, Gray Zabel, another offensive lineman. Who else is offensive lineman here? Donovan Jackson, Josh Connerly Jr., Josh Simmons. There were
What
many
about
opportunities to take an offensive lineman here. It's not like there was nobody on the board.
no, I agree with you. What about I mean they took an offensive lineman in the second round, but that was with their third pick. Probably should have been earlier than that. Where did the kid from Minnesota go? He went to Houston, but what pick number was that?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
I
I
wasn't sure if
mean,
you had that.
irrelevant. Honestly, it's like you guys had there were wide receivers and tight ends available in the second round at the top of the draft to be able to address those needs if you felt like that was a position of need for you at some point. To not get the most important positions on your team shored up, and to take a tight end and a third string wide receiver, like a slot wide receiver, not
Yeah.
even like somebody who's like but could potentially be like a two. Like you have all of your guys pretty much shored up, like at the wide receiver position. You, like I said, you have DJ Moore in a long-term deal. You spent a top 10 pick on a Roma Dunze last season. That was just a very redundant pick, in my opinion, especially that early. If you wanted to go and attack it later on in the draft and throw some darts at some guys who you think that could matter, yeah, for sure. But it seemed like I don't understand why this is such a position of concern for them. Like when he went out last year and traded a 4th round pick for Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen did nothing all season. So it's just like, what's the obsession with trying to get so much depth at this wide receiver position? And like I said, this entire time getting at Poles again, Poles has proven that he can just like not be trusted with this in any way, shape, or form. He hasn't brought in many good players. And I think that like even looking at who they have right now on offense, DeAndre Swift is not a very good running back. DJ Moore at this point is not a number 1 wide receiver. Roma Dunze had a very shaky rookie year that I would be concerned about if I was going into year 2. And we need to see him take a massive step forward, because everybody loves to talk about how Marvin Harrison Jr. had such a rough season. I mean, Roma Dunze was pretty much non-existent last year on the Chicago offense. So I just think that, like, why should we trust any sort of talent coming in on this offense that Poles felt like that was their guy?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a valid concern. He has not done a good job of building this team, at least the last 2 years, and I think it's totally reasonable to come into this season with a lot of skepticism around the guys that they currently have. I think that that's totally fair, but I think the whole point of trying to go out and get a guy like Ben Johnson is obviously there's a lot of risk there, but you saw how great the Lions looked offensively. I think the hope is that this guy is there and can develop Caleb Williams, and you solve your quarterback issues that you've had in Chicago for how long? Since Jay Cutler?
Forever, really.
Yeah, forever. So a
I
lot of
do want to
question marks around this team.
I do want to say that, like, I understand that people are excited about the the idea of Ben Johnson, but also at the same time, it's like, can we meet this with a little bit of hesitation? Like, we look at what his tenure with the Detroit Lions, his first year as a play caller, as the OC, he finished 9-8 and they missed the playoffs, which is fine. That would be a bump from last year. Then the next season, then they took that next step where it's like, okay, there, that we have a 12-5 season. We look really good. Then the next season they finish 15-2. I'm not saying that this isn't something that could be never solved for the Chicago Bears. I'm saying right now, right here and now, going into the 2025 season, I think that this team stands zero chance. I don't think that they're built for right now in any way, shape, or form. I think they're a few years away to begin with, and that's with Caleb and Ben Johnson kind of syncing up and being able to do this. And I don't think that the guys that they have on this roster on the offensive line and the defensive line are going to be guys who are going to be here long term. I think that there needs to be long term solutions figured out at every single one of these positions, these key positions for them to be able to take that next step. When you look at what Ben Johnson had in Detroit, they had a very short up offensive line from tackle to tackle
One of the best.
who've been there for years. Then you go and you add somebody like a David Montgomery. Then you go and you add somebody like a Jahmyr Gibbs after the establishment was already set.
The
Then you
luxury pick.
then you hit on a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was a late round wide receiver who has then turned up into being one of the best wide receivers in the entire league. They did so much right in the front office in Detroit, where I feel like It's not apples to apples comparisons for
No,
everybody to just kind of sit here and be like, well, yep, Chicago has all of this, and Ben Johnson's going to be able to sit here and figure it out. I don't think Ben Johnson is the problem. I don't think Caleb Williams is the problem. Ryan Poles is 100% the problem. He has not done anything good other than getting saved by a shitty draft class, a shitty draft trade with the Carolina Panthers. If it wasn't for that trade, he would have already been gone. So
no doubt.
plain and simple. And I just want I don't have an issue with the Chicago Bears being good long term, but next season I think that there are going to be some massive growing pains with this team. Excuse me.
I forgive you. Yeah, I mean, I'll say that my excitement around Ben Johnson is likely more long term as well. Um, do I think the Bears will be a little bit better than they were last year? Yes, I do. Um, but that is because I expect Caleb Williams to develop more as a quarterback. Do I think that this is a team that is a legitimate contender to win the division? No. That's not my expectation at all. I expect them to be a little bit better, but I agree. I think the move is more of a long-term solution than an immediate fix as of right now. Because going back to this, you mentioned the year by year growth of the Lions, and it started out and has been really ugly, and it has built into something really special. At least the last couple years, this last season was. Um, I think we could easily see a similar growth with the Chicago Bears here. Um, I think they're a little bit further along than the Lions were, because didn't the Lions go like 2-15 that one year or something crazy?
Yes.
So I think they're a little bit further along than that. But the offensive line and defensive line are where the Lions were a step ahead of this Bears team. The Lions have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Um, they've hit on some solid draft picks. They argue like Aiden Hutchinson healthy is probably a top 5, 6 defensive end in the NFL. Um, but and Chicago doesn't have a guy like that. So I think the Bears are a step behind in some places. But I think they have a higher ceiling long term than what the Detroit Lions have or had.
Yeah. One other thing I want to talk about, and then we can get into a little bit more like vague the futures and some win totals and stuff. I haven't heard, and you have obviously butted heads with me on this and tried to act like it was kind of like a non-factor. I've heard nothing good about Caleb Williams this offseason. And I think it really stemmed from that original article where it felt extremely unnecessary for his dad to come out and pretty much state that like he didn't want to be in Chicago to begin with. It feels like they're already like laying the breadcrumbs a little bit to they're not saying that there's an inevitable breakup because at this point I think that being able to figure out what's going on with Ben Johnson, can Ben Johnson fix him? If that does not happen, it feels like that they're laying out the inevitable inevitable breadcrumbs to be like the Chicago Bears is just a completely dysfunctional organization and it would have never worked out for me with my career with the Chicago Bears. On top of that, just some other little media stuff as well, like where like body language talk from in the presser and all of that stuff. And I understand that Ben Johnson is trying to figure out a way to turn things around and make things right. But also at the same time, I never hear anything good about Caleb Williams. I read a story the other day about Cam Ward, and Cam Ward has, I don't know if you have noticed this yet or not with the Cam Ward stories that are coming out of Tennessee. He has immediately impacted and shifted the culture for the Tennessee Titans, where he had a group start in the offseason coming in every single day at 5 a.m. And they were like, okay, like once camp starts and everything like that, like this will all die down. They're still doing it. And there's just been like nothing but like Cam Ward has come in and impacted this culture and the guys are really rallying behind him and all that. I don't any teammate or anybody say anything positive about Caleb Williams. And I know that like this isn't something that you like might not care about per se or whatever, but I think it does matter because at a point, like you would think that a wide receiver would say something positive about him. Even before he got there, DJ Moore publicly was stating that he just wanted Justin Fields to stay and not bring in Caleb Williams. I think that there's weird vibes with Caleb Williams and the Bears organization and all of the players on the football team. I mean, there was a play last season where DJ Moore legitimately quit during
Yeah.
the play and walked off the field and took his helmet off and nothing was going on. That is like that is something. As much as people don't want to admit it, that is definitely something.
See, I always end up taking that stuff with like a grain of salt because at the end of the day, it just matters on how you play. Like I think that stuff does matter and I think it can make a difference, but ultimately what matters is how you play on the field and Caleb didn't play necessarily great. So I think that that plays into all of this as well. Like there's plenty of stories that go around of guys that end up being bad, like that do something great. Like Anthony Richardson was staying at draft night, like helping people clean up. Like you hear stuff like that all the time with players that end up having no significant NFL career. So I understand your point. I think at the end of the day, you have to just go out there and play. And I think winning and playing well solves a lot of problems. Now, obviously, that's a lot to ask of Ben Johnson and this coaching staff with how dysfunctional this team and this organization has been for the last handful of seasons. But um, like I said, I just try to take that stuff kind of with a grain of salt. The DJ Moore thing, I do agree is a little bit weirder than the rest of it because that's not a great sign if your guys are just like quitting on you. But like I said, that could be a lot of different things. That could just be unhappiness with the offense as a whole, not necessarily it being directed at one person. So I try not to get too invested in that kind of stuff. I physically I can't because if I did, being a Philadelphia Eagles fan, I would just go fucking insane if I cared that much about every single little report or article that came out. I think there's certain things to consider, but I think it's you just have to try and stay even keel. And if you have a quarterback that can go out there and win you football games, then that's all that matters, in my opinion. Did you hear that? I can't hear. I can't hear you. I can hear you.
I don't know what's going on here on my end. I didn't hear what you said.
Great.
Hold on, my bad. Talk.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
That you hear stories about guys that end up not being good. Like my example was Anthony Richardson. Like after draft night or whatever, he stayed out, he stayed extra and like helped people clean up and whatnot. And everyone was like, "Oh, this guy's the next big thing." So like, for good or for worse, I try to just take those stories like with a grain of salt. But I did say that and my other example was like if I cared about every little story like that as an Eagles fan, I would go fucking insane because those types of stories come out every other week here. So
yeah, but the difference there that I want to get at
is
is
winning is winning.
that is the difference of like that is like the most successful franchise in the NFL compared to like the least successful franchise in the
Yeah,
NFL.
yeah, I get that. I know.
So I think that that's like I just think that it's interesting that at some point, and maybe I'm wrong, if somebody has clips or something, somebody saying something positive about Caleb Williams, share them with me. But it has just been very like obvious almost that it's just like he doesn't want to be there. I mean, there were plenty of times last season where it just felt very mopey, I'd say, you know what I mean? Like bad
Yeah.
vibes, like even And I get it. He was getting beat up and everything like that. But at the end of the day, like, you are the guy. You're supposed to be the example. And that's why I use that Cam Ward story just as an example of, like, there are guys that, like, you just hear nothing but good things about, and it might not work out for Cam Ward, you know what I mean? But at some point, I want to hear somebody defend Caleb Williams. And like I said, it might exist. I feel like I'm pretty tuned in and tapped in. I haven't seen any of that. So sorry about my technical difficulties on my end. That was hilarious because I asked I said something and then you just like, I saw your voice started moving and I was like, well, I can't hear him at all.
I mean, undoubtedly, I would much rather hear good stories about my starting quarterback from the media than anything. But at the end of the day, like, if you're winning football games, that's all that realistically matters. So I think if they go out there and they win some football games this season,
silence the haters.
Yeah, that type of thing goes away. But if Caleb doesn't take a step forward in his development and this offense looks equally as clunky as it did last season, then I think some of those things will start to come from the dead, and those conversations will be looked at a little bit more significantly than maybe we thought originally. Because to be fair, they did come out in like the middle of the summer and there was nothing to talk about besides like the Nationals playing the Pirates on a Tuesday night. So it doesn't surprise me that they got more recognition at the time, but I haven't heard anything since then. Obviously you have heard bits and pieces, but I feel like the general consensus is like nobody's really heard much.
The critique of this was put out by Caleb Williams' camp. This wasn't
that's fair. I know.
Yeah, I think that, yes, you're correct. There was nothing going on, but there was a targeted piece with very specific language and a specific story told by the Caleb Williams camp, put out by them. Like, and that's why people ran with it. It's not like, it's not like, oh, like the media is misrepresenting this or something.
No, I know that
they wanted to do. And that's why it got talked about as much as it did. And I think that it's interesting. I felt like that was probably something that could have probably not been brought up. That's just me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I completely agree that they shouldn't be putting out rumors, anything like that after one unsuccessful season.
No. All right, let's move on. Some Vegas futures. Right now, their win total sits at 7.5, 8.5 some places. I think that's fair. I think 7 wins is right where they're sitting, honestly, like 7, 8 wins. To win the NFC North, they're sitting at plus 550. To win the Super Bowl, at plus 4,500. For MVP, for Caleb Williams to win MVP, he is sitting at plus 2,700. As of everybody else is
27 or 37?
3,700. Sorry.
Okay.
As for everybody else here, I don't think that they have a talented enough person on their offense to go and win that like offensive player of the year. I don't think that I don't think that they're going to win the Super Bowl. Obviously, I don't think that'd be like a great bet. I don't think Caleb Williams is going to win MVP. No. I don't think that'd be a great bet. Yeah. So I don't love anything here. I mean, if you do feel strongly about like a Luther Burden at offensive rookie of the year at like plus 4,000, or a Colson Loveland, if you think that those guys are going to be like big impact players, the only issue that I have with that is I said it at the beginning of this, there's only one football in Chicago. And it feels like DJ Moore has proven that he's going to probably get majority of the targets. He always has across his career.
Yeah, and I was gonna say Colson Loveland, but my rebuttal to that was basically what you just covered. Is he's not coming into a situation, where he's the number one guy. Like Brock Bowers walked in the door at Las Vegas and was the guy right away. So, and he was getting majority of the targets. Don't think that's how it's going to be here. By any means with Colson Loveland and the Chicago Bears. The one thing that stood out when you talked about Caleb Williams MVP number at plus 3,700. Here's a couple guys that he has higher MVP odds than. That this will just not, even as an Eagles fan, like, this is so ridiculous to me that he has higher MVP odds than Dak, higher MVP odds than Matt Stafford, higher MVP odds than Kyler Murray. I think that just goes to show how high people potentially are on the Bears and on Caleb Williams this season, with a couple new pieces and a new head coach. I mean, maybe it's a value pick, but
No,
there would have to be a lot of things. Like, the 3 new offensive linemen, they would have to just be cooking from day one, and this offensive line would have to be a top 10 unit throughout the season for Caleb Williams to win an MVP. And they're in a gauntlet of a division. They'd likely have to win the division too, and I just don't foresee either of those things happening.
I completely agree. Just some schedule review stuff. They have some tough clusters, honestly, on the schedule. They started out the season Minnesota, Detroit, Dallas. I think they're at Vegas. I think Vegas will be a good team. They have a really early bye, which obviously we've talked about before. That's not our preference. And then after the bye week, they go at Washington, home against New Orleans Saints, and then they go at Baltimore, at Cincinnati. Just some tough stretches there where they're going to be on the road, like almost 4 weeks in a row there. And then to round out the season too, I mean, you have the Giants, but then it's Minnesota, Pittsburgh Steelers, who I hate, but for some reason they're always decent. They're at Philly, at Green Bay. Then they have Cleveland to kind of tone things down. Then it's Green Bay, San Francisco, Detroit Lions. This is a rough schedule, honestly. I think that like the games that they have like in bunches are pretty rough. And it looks like at this point, yeah, they play the New Orleans Saints. Yeah, they play the Cleveland Browns. Those should be 2 layups. We might be able to, when the season starts, look at that as potential like look ahead spots where it's like, oh shit, they play the Baltimore Ravens, but they're playing the New Orleans Saints at 1:00 at home. Like, is that a game that they could drop? So it's just there's a lot. This is not an easy schedule by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, we talked about it. They play in probably one of the best divisions in football, and that's just kind of the reality of the situation right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up their strength of schedule overall here, but there's not really a period. I know that it's the NFL and anybody can beat anybody pretty much on any given week, but normally, yeah, they have one of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They have like a top 10 schedule difficulty heading into this season, which is not ideal for a team that just won 5 games last year, has a new head coach, a new OC, a new defensive coordinator, 3 new offensive linemen. But as I was saying, anybody can beat anybody on any weekend in the NFL, but there's not really like a stretch here of games where it's like, okay, we can grab some momentum and feel good a couple weeks in a row. I mean, it's like 2 tough games, a game that they can win. 2 tough games, a game that they can win, pretty much up and down the schedule. And I was probably a little bit higher than what I am right now when we started this podcast about how I felt about this Bears season. But looking through the schedule, it takes me back a step from what I was originally thinking, for expectations for this Bears team for 2025.
Yeah, let's get in our 2025 predictions, then we can move on. I just at this point in time, I will never go out on a limb and trust the Bears like I did last season ever again.
Fair,
They just
fair.
they haven't proven it in any way, shape, or form. Everybody thought Caleb Williams was going to come in and be an immediate impact player. He stunk. I know that. Look at his stats. He stunk. If you watch the games every week, they looked awful. So I just think that with that being said, I think Ben Johnson has his work cut out for him. And this isn't just like as effortlessly as everybody loves to state how great Ben Johnson is and all of this stuff. We need to watch it play out fully. This is his first time as a head coach. We need to see if he's actually cut out for it. There are a ton of guys who were offensive gurus who were going to be the princes that were promised and absolutely fell flat. So I think it's probably fair to meet that with a little bit of caution as well. And I just think that for this team in general, I just don't love the offense and I don't love the defense at all. I hate the defense actually. So I think that they're still going to be better than they were last year. I think that they go and win 7 games, but I think that's being generous, honestly. I don't think that this team is set up to go to the playoffs in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I had them at seven wins as well. I just think that this schedule is going to be difficult. There's a lot of things that bring red flags to my attention from this team. I think the coaching staff will be better than it was last year. Not necessarily just highlighting Ben Johnson, but I think it'll be a little bit better. I think Caleb will take a step forward a little bit, but I don't think this team's there yet. I think seven wins is probably a successful season for anybody outside of the Bears organization. If you just look at the struggle that they had last year, the amount of new that they have, and the amount of questions that they have coming into this year. Another thing that I didn't get a chance to talk about was people loved to compare the stats between Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams because I believe that they were kind of similar, like they might have thrown for close to the same amount of yards, maybe had similar passing touchdown totals. I just remember seeing a tweet of somebody saying like, it's crazy that all the disrespect that Caleb Williams is getting when him and Jaden Daniels had nearly identical stats. And to be fair, I didn't necessarily stat check it, but if you watched Jaden Daniels play last year and you watched Caleb Williams play last year, it realistically looked like you were watching a varsity quarterback in Jaden Daniels and a junior varsity quarterback in Caleb Williams. Jaden Daniels showed up in a lot of big games and was one game away from winning a Super Bowl. I don't really think it's disrespectful for playing in a Super Bowl. Sorry. I don't think it's disrespectful by any means to say that Caleb Williams is not the quarterback that Jaden Daniels is. They're also not similar in styles, which that's totally fine. But Jaden Daniels is definitely a better quarterback than Caleb Williams.
Let's just call it what it is. Last season, going into the year, if you were to ask any single person across the NFL who was set up better for success going into their teams, Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, every single person would have said the Chicago Bears were in a way better spot with their roster, and he was walking into a way better situation with the Commanders than that Caleb was with the Bears than Jaden Daniels was with the Commanders. And then Jaden Daniels went and won 12 games in the regular season, won 2 playoff games, went on the road and beat one of the best teams in the NFL by a 9-point favorite, and Caleb Williams went on a 10-game losing streak last season to end the year. It's not even close, actually, to say the least. They weren't playing the same game. You can compare stats all you want, but I mean, there's nothing to compare. If you watch the games play out, Jaden Daniels was playing a completely different game of football with way worse weapons and elevated every single person on that team. So, there's really not much to talk about right there, but thank you for bringing it up.
You're welcome. It was something that was kind of bugging me because I'm just like, I really like Caleb Williams and I think he will end up being a good quarterback, but I just don't get how you can even compare the two.
You can't. Not right now, at least.
Not right now.
I just spit it. Good girl, we're getting paper as a passion. Collect the stacks and bring it back, man, and take vision.